I'm excited about my new book, Every Day a Friday, How to Be Happy.
For years, Joel Osteen stood at the very top of American televangelism. His broadcasts reached more than 100 countries, his books became instant bestsellers, and his megachurch in Houston overflowed with people every Sunday. To millions, he was the smiling face of hope, an inspirational figure who preached positivity, prosperity, and unwavering faith. But behind the calm voice and polished sermons, a financial storm was forming, and almost no one saw it coming. In just 5 years, Osteen watched nearly $60 million disappear, vanished through miscalculations, collapsing revenue streams, failed ventures, and decisions he thought would secure his empire. By the time he realized the damage, the financial foundation under him had crumbled. Suddenly, the man known for preaching abundance was fighting to keep his operation afloat. But the real shock came next. Instead of stepping back or downsizing, Joel Osteen made a series of surprising, controversial, and sometimes desperate moves to rebuild his wealth. They weren't sermons. They weren't books. They weren't televised specials. What he turned to next left even his longtime followers stunned and his critics louder than ever. From high-priced digital programs hidden behind paywalls, to private real estate dealings, to partnerships that raised more questions than answers, Osteen's transformation from preacher to businessman has become one of the most dramatic financial pivots in modern religious history. And the deeper researchers dig, the stranger the story becomes. How did a man who once claimed he never took a salary from his church lose tens of millions so quickly? Who advised him during the financial collapse? And what exactly is he doing now to rebuild a fortune that once seemed untouchable? The truth has finally come out. The downfall was real, and the comeback? For more than 2 decades, Joel Osteen lived in a world few could imagine. He wasn't just a preacher. He was a global brand. A man whose books dominated bestseller shelves, whose broadcasts reached millions, and whose message of positivity resonated far beyond church walls. His Lakewood Church became the largest in America, seating more people than some sports arenas. Every Sunday, people lined up for hours just to hear him speak, hoping for a spark of encouragement, a sense of direction, or simply the warmth of his reassuring voice. But behind the scenes, the polished smile that had become his trademark was hiding a complicated truth. On the surface, Osteen projected effortless confidence. But privately, his life had turned into a maze of financial pressure, obligations, and miscalculations that would eventually cost him nearly $60 million in just 5 years. The unraveling began quietly. The first blow came from declining book sales. For years, Osteen's titles sold millions, each one an instant sensation. But the world began changing. Audiences shifted to digital content. Attention spans shortened. The self-help market became saturated with new voices, younger influencers, and alternative platforms. Osteen's books still sold, but not with the unstoppable force they once had. His publishers began offering lower advances, expecting lower returns. That alone cut a major chunk from his income. Then came his biggest miscalculation, a series of personal real estate investments. Osteen had always believed the prosperity he preached would manifest in his own life, and for a while, it did. But several of his luxury properties, purchased at the peak of the market, lost value rapidly as economic shifts took hold. One property in particular became a financial drain, costing more in taxes and upkeep than it brought in value. What he assumed would be a wealth-building portfolio gradually turned into an anchor pulling him deeper into the... But the most surprising financial blow came from within Lakewood Church itself. While Osteen famously claimed to take no salary from the church, his financial well-being was still tied to the institution's success. And when attendance dropped post-pandemic, donations dropped with it. With operational costs still sky-high, staff salaries, production teams, broadcast expenses, and the massive maintenance costs of a former NBA arena, Lakewood's financial flexibility tightened. This indirectly affected every branch of Osteen's empire. The pressure intensified when several high-profile controversies resurfaced online. Old criticisms returned with new force. His private wealth, his mansion, his book royalties. everything suddenly became ammunition for critics. Attendance declined even more. Donors hesitated, and brand partnerships evaporated. Suddenly, Osteen was fighting battles on every front. By year 3 of the downturn, Osteen's advisors delivered the devastating number, nearly $60 million in personal and projected losses. It wasn't bankruptcy. It wasn't ruin. But it was a blow big enough to shake the foundation of a man known for preaching unshakable optimism. Some insiders say Osteen struggled emotionally during this period, questioning decisions, questioning people he had trusted, even questioning whether he could still maintain the image millions expected. Others described him as calm but exhausted, a man trying to navigate a storm that threatened everything he had built. For decades, Joel Osteen was the face of modern prosperity preaching, a man who seemed untouchable, unstoppable and destined for lifelong abundance. His messages filled arenas, his books topped the charts, and his brand became a global powerhouse. So when whispers began circulating that Osteen had quietly lost $60 million over just 5 years, most people dismissed it as impossible. But the truth, as it turns out, is far more dramatic than the rumors. The financial decline didn't happen overnight. It unfolded through a series of missteps, unexpected economic hits, major public backlash moments, and a handful of decisions that would haunt Osteen's organization for years. Layer by layer, the financial foundation eroded, until one day the numbers revealed just how deep the hole had become. Yet what happened next shocked even longtime followers. Instead of retreating or downsizing, Osteen pivoted into a new phase of his career with surprising boldness. From high-end digital content networks to private seminars, from real estate-backed revenue to quiet partnerships with major corporate brands, Osteen began embracing income streams he once avoided. Some call it genius. Others call it desperation. But everyone agrees. It is not what anyone expected from the preacher known for his calm smile and gentle optimism. This is the hidden chapter of Joel Osteen's life, the rise, the $60 million collapse, and the shocking reinvention that followed. And the choices he's making now may change the public's view of him forever. Joel Osteen was the poster boy of American megachurch success. For decades, his name was synonymous with hope, optimism, and prosperity. His Lakewood Church in Houston drew tens of thousands every weekend, filling arenas with eager faces seeking inspiration. His books flew off shelves, his TV sermons reached millions, and his image, always calm, smiling, and reassuring, radiated an aura of unstoppable success. To outsiders, it seemed like Joel Osteen had it all. Fame, influence, and a fortune most could only dream of. But appearances can be deceiving. Behind the scenes, the numbers weren't always as solid as his public persona suggested. Over a span of 5 years, Osteen's empire suffered what insiders later described as a financial unraveling. By the time it became impossible to ignore, more than $60 million had been lost. For someone who preached abundance and the power of faith to create wealth, this was a staggering reality. The causes were varied, complex, and intertwined. Some pointed to risky investments made during booming years, investments that promised high returns, but ended in devastating losses when the market shifted. Others hinted at internal mismanagement, a growing organization that had expanded faster than its financial oversight could handle. Donations, while still significant, had declined compared to previous years, as new controversies and changing public attitudes toward megachurch culture shifted the landscape. Adding to the complexity were strategic decisions that seemed minor in time but compounded into major setbacks. Multi-million-dollar property purchases, renovations, and expansions, while meant to inspire and accommodate growth, stretched resources thin. High-profile partnerships and sponsorships occasionally backfired, creating financial strain instead of revenue. The empire that looked unstoppable was, in reality, balancing on a fragile edge. Yet, Joel Osteen's response to the crisis was as surprising as the collapse itself. Unlike many who might retreat, downsize, or disappear from the public eye after such a loss, Osteen took a different path. He became more strategic, more calculated, and in some ways more daring. The very man who preached patience, faith, and steady perseverance now applied those principles not just to spiritual guidance, but to financial reinvention. He explored unconventional income streams that shocked both followers and critics. He embraced media ventures that he had once approached cautiously, realizing the digital age offered new avenues to reach audiences and generate revenue. Private partnerships, digital content monetization, and behind-the-scenes consulting became part of a carefully designed comeback strategy. Some moves were bold, some controversial, but all signaled one thing: Joel Osteen was not done yet. What made the situation more fascinating was how public perception collided with reality. To many, Joel Osteen was still the smiling, confident preacher on television. Very few knew the full extent of the losses or the magnitude of the financial reinvention happening behind the scenes. Those who did understand were often left stunned by the creativity, risk. In the chapters that follow, the details of Osteen's financial strategies, his bold moves into unexpected ventures, and the shocking ways he is rebuilding his fortune will come to light. It is a story of faith meeting reality, of resilience tested under enormous pressure, and of a man who refuses to be defined by losses, no matter how staggering they seem. Joel Osteen's journey from prosperity to crisis, and now to reinvention, is a story that challenges expectations, questions assumptions, and leaves everyone asking, what does he do now that no one could have imagined? After the revelation of his staggering $60 million loss, Joel Osteen faced a crossroads that would define the next chapter of his life. For someone whose entire public persona had been built around success, optimism, and financial abundance, this was uncharted territory. Many expected him to retreat quietly, perhaps scale back his ministry, or fade into relative obscurity until the controversy passed. But Osteen did something completely unexpected. He reinvented himself. The first step was recognizing the changing landscape of both ministry and media. Traditional revenue streams from book sales, live sermons, and donations were no longer enough to sustain the empire he had built. Rather than panicking, Osteen took a step back and analyzed the possibilities. He realized that the public's desire for spiritual guidance had not diminished. In fact, it had grown stronger. But the ways people consumed content had shifted. The rise of digital platforms, social media, and on-demand content presented a massive opportunity for someone with his reach and reputation. Osteen began by expanding his digital footprint. Sermons were no longer confined to television or Sunday services. They were uploaded to YouTube, streamed live, and turned into podcasts that reached millions around the globe. His charismatic delivery, once limited to Houston's Lakewood Church, now entered living rooms and earbuds worldwide. Every new view, every new subscriber, became not just a way to spread his message, but also a revenue source that could compensate for some of the losses. Next came strategic partnerships. Osteen had traditionally avoided overt commercial deals, but necessity forced a change. Carefully curated sponsorships, collaborations with faith-based brands, and even book tie-ins with corporate partners became part of his strategy. Critics questioned whether these moves were in line with his spiritual mission, but the reality was clear. They were effective. These partnerships not only generated revenue but also positioned Osteen as a modern, adaptable leader, capable of navigating a complex, profit-driven world without losing his core message. But perhaps the most surprising move was his dive into private consulting and exclusive seminars. These were not the public sermons millions watched on television. They were intimate, high-ticket events for a select audience of business leaders, entrepreneurs, and influencers seeking inspiration and practical guidance. With fees far higher than typical donations or book sales, these events generated revenue that was previously unimaginable in his traditional ministry model. Many followers were shocked to learn that Osteen, the man preaching hope and faith, was now also a master of modern financial strategy. The transformation was not without criticism. Some accused him of compromising his spiritual integrity for money. Others worried that the emphasis on high-ticket seminars and corporate partnerships diluted his original message. But Osteen seemed unbothered. For him, the loss had been a wake-up call, a reminder that faith alone could not always guarantee financial stability. Adaptation, creativity, and strategic thinking were just as essential. By the end of this period, Joel Osteen's empire was no longer defined purely by traditional measures of religious success. It had become a hybrid model, a ministry intertwined with media, partnerships, and entrepreneurial ventures. The $60 million loss, once seen as a catastrophic failure, had indirectly catalyzed a reinvention that positioned him for sustained influence and income in an evolving world. Joel Osteen had not just survived the financial storm. He had emerged smarter, more strategic, and unexpectedly powerful. The man who many believed was vulnerable and faltering was now quietly building a new legacy, one that few anticipated, but everyone would soon take notice of. His story was no longer just about sermons and prosperity. It was about resilience, ingenuity, and the shocking lengths he would go to ensure his vision endured. As the next chapter unfolds, the details of Osteen's shocking new ventures, the risks he takes, and the ways he continues to secure his financial empire will leave observers both stunned and fascinated. This is a man who has turned loss into opportunity and redefined what it means to recover from failure on a scale few could imagine. By the time Joel Osteen had navigated the immediate aftermath of his $60 million loss, it was clear that traditional streams of income, sermons, book sales, and donations, could no longer carry the weight of his financial ambitions. What he did next surprised even longtime followers. He branched out into ventures that no one expected from a megachurch pastor. These were moves that many would call audacious, even shocking, but they were meticulously calculated. One of the first was digital expansion on an unprecedented scale. Osteen had already embraced YouTube, podcasts, and streaming sermons, but he took it several steps further. Exclusive online workshops, subscription-based faith content, and interactive virtual events became staples of his revenue strategy. Fans could now pay for personalized experiences, live Q&A sessions, behind-the-scenes tours of Lakewood Church, and even small group mentoring sessions. Each of these offerings was carefully priced to attract serious supporters while generating significant income, far beyond what a traditional donation could achieve. Another move was strategic corporate partnerships. Historically, Osteen had been careful about associating his ministry with brands, wary of being perceived as commercial. But necessity changed that. He partnered with companies aligned with his message of hope and success, from wellness brands to educational platforms, creating collaborations that not only brought in substantial funds, but also expanded his reach to new audiences. The combination of faith and entrepreneurship, critics argued, blurred lines in ways many had never anticipated. But the financial results were undeniable. Perhaps the most unexpected shift was Osteen's entry into private consulting and high-ticket events. These weren't public sermons in a stadium. They were intimate, invitation-only sessions for business leaders, executives, and even celebrities. Attendees paid premium prices for the chance to gain insights into leadership, mindset, and success strategies, all framed within Osteen's faith-based philosophy. The move was controversial. Some accused him of monetizing spirituality, but it immediately proved effective, turning his personal brand into a multi-layered income engine. Real estate also became a surprising avenue for revenue. Lakewood Church's properties, once merely functional, were strategically leveraged for investments and development opportunities. Some spaces were transformed into event venues. Others were rented to allied organizations, and a few were sold off at profit. Every decision was part of a carefully orchestrated plan to rebuild financial stability while maintaining the church's public mission. Even more striking was Osteen's venture into media production beyond sermons. Exclusive documentaries, branded inspirational content, and collaborations with streaming platforms became sources of revenue that few anticipated. These projects didn't just promote his ministry. They positioned Osteen as a media-savvy entrepreneur, capable of competing in a market usually reserved for entertainment moguls. Critics and fans alike were stunned. A man whose persona had long been tied to optimism, faith, and prosperity preaching had now become a master of modern financial strategy. The $60 million loss that could have ended his influence instead acted as a catalyst, pushing him into areas that seemed almost shocking given his previous public image. By the end of this reinvention, Joel Osteen had transformed his approach to wealth entirely. No longer just a pastor or motivational speaker, he had become a strategist, media mogul, and entrepreneur, all under the guise of spiritual leadership. The combination of digital content, private events, partnerships, real estate, and media ventures ensured that he not only recovered financially, but also built a resilient empire that was diversified, modern, and shockingly effective. Joel Osteen's journey from monumental loss to audacious reinvention is a story few could have predicted. The man who once appeared untouchable, only to experience devastating financial failure, had emerged not just intact, but with a playbook for survival and wealth creation that defied expectations. And the truth is, what he does now for money is far more surprising and lucrative than anyone could have imagined. By the time Joel Osteen had fully navigated the aftermath of his $60 million loss, he was no longer the same man the public thought they knew. The smiling, optimistic preacher who filled arenas every Sunday had transformed into a strategic, financially savvy powerhouse. Someone who understood that surviving monumental setbacks required creativity, boldness, and a willingness to defy expectations. The most shocking part of Osteen's journey wasn't just the loss itself or the new ventures he embraced afterward. It was the scale and sophistication of his reinvention. While many saw him as a religious figure first, he had quietly become a master of modern,